Hi, Courtney.
I was going to say what we're going to talk about, but maybe we don't even use the words. And so I'll say, I was saying something, and then David, who is not an astrologer, was like, well, why do you always have to bring astrology into it? Maybe you lose something of the sort. And I said, I don't think so because it makes so much sense to me. And then we were having this whole conversation, and everything we were talking about, without even trying to, was already talking about what we planned on talking about without having any intention of talking about it. Are we all affected?
Not only that, we we started the recording while we're both hysterically laughing, which is a complete fifth house signature. You
Yes.
know,
We could
just
always, that's so, yes. I didn't, yes.
right. It's just so when you're when I get what your husband says about astrology, but just it doesn't change anything about your life or existence, but it just gives you that extra tool. It's like an extra sensory awareness of, okay, things are unfolding. And isn't it interesting that, for instance, we started our conversation about the fifth house by mentioning it, and before we know it, we're laughing,
And we
in a
didn't
really
plan
great.
on it. We didn't
That's
like,
right.
we didn't plan on, and we didn't plan on it.
Right.
We didn't say, okay, we're going to have, but okay, I've been thinking so much about movies actually now that we're talking. And I'll say to you, I keep on thinking the people that are creating the movies, I don't think they plan on ex how profound the movie is. Wait, I have a great story for you actually, Bill. So we watched Forrest Gump yesterday. You want to hear the craziest part? So right at the point, David says, I'm I can't help but cry. And it wasn't a sad point, but guess what? There was a lake in the scene. And I thought, oh, I have to tell Phil. I have to tell Phil. And then, so I keep thinking about how genius Forrest Gump is. And I think when you're making a movie, sometimes the creators don't know how profound something's going to be. They have
Right.
it flow through them. And if they knew how profound it would be, they would lose something. Does that make sense? I keep on
Yes.
thinking the greatest films are so beautiful.
Hmm.
And I think it's because they're not trying so hard.
Right. I really think that they're channeling this story, and they're coming together, and they're imagining it together, and they're each contributing to something. And I also think, at least when, more so in the, you know, in classic Hollywood than today, that they were letting these ideas move through their hearts and minds, and creating something. I don't think they were as obsessed, about, checking off boxes, marketing boxes, like, will this appeal to this age group, and blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot of that.
They were not making the film for the audience. They were making the film because they were making the film. And it wasn't trying
Right,
to, it is fifth house to the
right,
fullest.
right,
And if you're, it's so interesting that you said that, right? They were just, they had a purpose, they had a meaning, and they had
right,
to decide that they were going to do an art. They weren't trying to make the art to satisfy
right.
people.
What they were saying was, this story is so interesting, and I'm going to get my friends excited about it because no one's seen it before, and we're going to do it. And I think independent people still do that, but I don't think studios do that anymore. And there's a reason for that, and I completely understand why. But I think I think people are always going to find a way to get those interesting, unusual stories out in the world.
Yeah, but they're not the same. I mean, I think it's so interesting, and I do understand that we have to do things to make money, right? But and I also you can't help but think about the 11th house when you think about the fifth house of are you trying not to get canceled and not get alienated? And if you're trying to not get canceled and alienated, do you lose some of the magic?
Exactly. And some people, you call them the crazy out there geniuses. They're simply compelled to do their thing. They just, you know, you think about really edgy comics or, unusual performance artists or this, whatever you might think.
Well,
They're just,
any genius that is out there is an artist in some way. I mean, you have to be. You have to, it is, I do believe there's this channeling that we're all capable of and that we're all able to do, but you almost have to let go of your own ego to do it.
I completely agree.
But and not care what people think of you. I mean, it's an interesting thing because I have that. I've been thinking so much about that. What would I do if I didn't care what anyone thought of me?
Right. Yes. And
I would tell everyone I love them.
right.
Think about
Exactly.
that. I mean, I think that's very fifth house. I would just be like, I love you and
Mhm.
not need anything back,
Exactly. Exactly.
which is the
And
hard
so,
part.
right. So what if you decided, I'm going to tell people how much I love them by tap dancing. And even if you're not good at it, I'm going to tap dance to let people know how much I love them. And you just do it and you offer it out there and you just, you know, because your need for self-expression and your joy for life is so strong that you can't contain it. You're not going to wall yourself in. And
Well,
I think
that's
that
why it's the house of children. I mean, you think about children and they don't do it. They don't care what they look like. They are just having fun. They literally are just having fun and they're not worried about what the next person thinks of them. I think it's so interesting. I think it turns around like 7 or 8 where they become aware of oh my God, that person might have an opinion about me. And then you think it goes into the sixth house, right? And then the critic. But how about if I didn't care about what the critic says and I just created or I tap dance because I love tap dancing?
exactly.
How nice life would be, Phil, if we weren't so worried about the critic. If we could really do the fifth house and create without concern of moving to the sixth house. And maybe that's part of our problem in life is we're never really present with whatever we're doing.
Right. And you know, giving it 100% come hell or high water. To really believe that. It's
I
yeah,
believe you can do it. Like go back to the innocence of a child. There's no fear of them fail. It's the you're not worried about failing.
mhm.
You're not trying to prove anything, right? You're tap dancing because you love somebody. Or I mean, I used to perform for my parents all the time. I would like do these shows for them. I'm sure I looked.
Yeah,
But I didn't
but
care. I
right,
didn't care.
right. If that was, it's interesting. If that was not part of your consciousness at all, you never would have mentioned it. Like it doesn't. I'm sure they loved everything you did.
Oh,
I'm
they
sure
did.
they were so proud of you.
Well,
But
I don't think they were proud. They loved me. They were proud, but they loved when I performed for them. They were so happy. And I was not, I'll say to you, particularly talented, but it didn't matter. That you see the interesting thing? But maybe I was talented because I was free.
yes, to them you were because you were uninhibited. That's a gift.
I know. And then the world kind of does want you to fit into a box and behave in a certain way. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, first of all, the fifth house has sun energy, right? The sun is the ruler of the fifth house. So you can imagine how much power
Wait, I
and
didn't even know this. Look,
there you go.
I
There you
didn't
go.
plan on it, by the way. It just
There
was
you
on my
go.
thing from this week, but
Yes. Yes, you're looking like the sun today, and I'm looking more like the moon, which is great.
which
But
is great because without, right, you need the
right.
contrast.
Mhm. but that, that sun energy is really motivating and pushing individual expression and being really bold about it. And I say, wow, anyone fortunate enough to have lots of planets in the fifth house, it's really a blessing for all of us, for that
Well,
person.
yeah, and remember, I mean, we're all having planets going. We all have a ruler of that house. We all have planets that will go through that house. I mean, once a month, that moon will go through your fifth house, no matter what. So it doesn't really matter if you have a house is never empty per se, right? Because you will
Mhm.
always have something that's transiting it, or there will be some kind of energy that needs it. And every one of us are creative geniuses, and we all are talented in our own way. And I
Mhm.
think that's interesting of how do we not judge or compare ourselves to other people to base our what our talent is. Does that make sense? Like
Yes.
how do we use our fifth house and how do we use our sun in a way that's allows us to shine? I mean,
Right. And how do you know that whatever performance or whatever creative offering you're showing to the world is not going to hit home to someone and change their life? How do you know? There's no way you will ever know. For some people, they could become very popular and make a living from these things, and that's great. But that shouldn't dissuade anybody from offering the work of their creativity to the world, because it's out of our hands who may connect with it and who might be grateful to see it or emotionally moved, or whose life may be improved by contact with whatever offering it is you're bringing.
which goes back to another point of the fifth house is that, you know, fame doesn't make someone happy.
Mm-hmm.
Happiness, you have to like what you're doing in your insides, right? And if you're doing it to have popularity, I'll say, right, fifth house, then when even if you get popular or you get noticed, that emptiness will still stay within you if you're not knowing it yourself. Like if you're not constantly, consciously, it's like being in love, right? That feeling of being in love is very much the fifth house, right? But now, how do we can't control if someone loves us. We cannot. So how do we really love ourselves and love our own creation of ourselves? So it's really interesting what you said, because yes, things might become popular, but it's not, the popularity is not going to change how I feel about myself. And I think that's a very important part of the fifth house.
And that has to do with having a strong ego. I mean, a strong ego doesn't mean that you know you you cater to a large audience and you're bigger than life. I think a strong ego is, in the case of loving someone, you're you feel comfortable telling someone that you love them without being hung up too much on the outcome, whether it be I love you too, or I don't love you, or I'm not sure. You're just so brave and you're so healthy in your ego that you share it, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah. Well, and I think we can love everybody. I mean, I really do think that we're capable of really loving people. And if they love us back, that's really wonderful. And if they don't, I mean, that's okay too. I mean, that's the interesting part, right?
Yes.
We might, I go back to like the energy of Leo, which is very much fifth house energy, but if you like me, I say thank you. By the way, I am not great at this. Okay, so let's just be very clear that I know I'm not great at this. But the higher self would say, if you really like me, thank you. And if you don't like me, thank you. Either way, the group, I cannot control what the group thinks. I can't control what the other thinks is right. And how do I allow myself to be me without fitting into what you want me to be? Does that make sense? This is my biggest problem in life, by the way. So just so you know, I'm not great at this. I just,
It's hard not to feel a little bit wounded when you feel like somebody isn't reciprocating your love or your attention or your respect. There are just some people that I interact with who I know will not reciprocate in the way that I would hope to. And I have to work hard to not let resentment, find its way in there so that I become critical and dismissive of these people because they're I'm not pointing out those things to them, so they wouldn't be aware of it. And I
well,
don't.
what about resentment? Let's use a different word because I think we're in the fifth house. So I'll say to you, embarrassment. Like
Yes.
when we give something to somebody, right? And they're not reciprocating, we could almost be embarrassed, right? We could get like almost mortified, right? Does that make sense? Like, say we tell someone we
Yeah.
love them and they
Yeah.
just look at us like, I-
Yeah.
we could be embarrassed. I mean, it's like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. And because there's a vulnerability, right? About wearing your heart on your sleeve and
Mhm.
sharing something with somebody.
Yes. It's hard. It's scary. It's really scary.
Yeah, to be in love is probably the scariest thing because it hurts to not be loved back, right? And you
Mhm.
can't control. I keep on going back to the cage bird, right? Where if you have to let someone out of the cage to be free, think about like, think about the cage. You know that there's a quote, and I'm not really good with getting the quote right. There's a quote like, if someone loves you, you have to be willing to set them free. And if they come back to you, it's meant to be. And if it's not, you can't control people. But you think about that, right? You can't hold on very tight to people because people don't like that. They feel constrained. You have to be willing to let it go, right? The 11th house. And if it comes back to you, that's love. I mean, but our human self, it's not so easy.
Yeah, and I think love in itself is a process as well. Your feelings about somebody or something can grow. They can become stronger, so that you there might be cases where you're feeling love for someone and you're not fully aware of it for whatever reason. This person has been in your life forever. You've got this particular relationship where you're not even thinking of it as love. It's just someone in your orbit, and but then if when you do start to think of that person as, valuable and important in your life, you know, I've actually told people, you know, you are very important to me and I care about you very much. And when I first started saying that, it was incredibly emotional for me to get the words out. It was so, my body was shaking when I, when I just expressed it. These were this was a feeling I've had internally, but just to express it, like you say, you're putting yourself out on a limb. And even though in all these cases I felt as secure as you possibly can be about sharing that with somebody, and yet still it was I think it was just because it was coming right from my heart. It was loaded. The words were just loaded with meaning.
Well, you were appreciate when we appreciate people, it's there's something vulnerable in it, right? I mean, there is something vulnerable in appreciating somebody. Even if you don't want anything back, right? There is this vulnerability of opening your heart and expressing yourself, no matter what you do. I mean, whether it's in this private way or in a public way, right? Is it in a way what you were saying? There's something very artistic about your words that you were using, and they meant a lot to you. They were true. So when you say the truth or when you're telling somebody in a vulnerable way your feelings about them and letting yourself be seen, right? Then it puts a vulnerability into it. So I'll say you thank you, Phil, because it takes a lot of courage to be seen. Like a lot of times people say they want to be seen, but they really don't want to be seen. They don't do anything for themselves to be seen. So they stay hidden, right? They stay in that fourth house shell and the Cancer shell, and then they don't let themselves go out in the world and have start to dance with someone. I mean, the fifth house is the beginning also of where we start to have intimacy stuff, right? So we're falling in love, we're just meeting each other, and then we're gonna lust over each other, and we're gonna have sexual energy together, and we're gonna get excited, right? And so there is a, in order to even do that, there is a vulnerability in there. So then you could go move on to the sixth house of does this work daily for me in my daily life? And then am I willing to commit? But that fifth house is super important because if you don't have that excitement, you don't really kind of listen. If me and you weren't naturally excited with each other, I don't mean in a sexual way, but in general, we wouldn't moved on to have this relationship. Something you said excited me, and something I said excited you, and so we're here and we're being vulnerable together in public.
Right. And it's interesting that you bring up that other dimension of the fifth house, sexuality, which has so much to do with vulnerability because you're completely exposing yourself. You're not hiding behind anything. There's no clothes, there's no, you're boy, you're putting yourself out there, right? But it's, it's very that much that fifth house energy of, sexuality as a creative function, a pleasure function, not just, procreation, which I think falls in a different house. This is this is a very physical kind of creative self-expression that is bound up in heart energy of love.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, right? And joy and inner experience and lust, right? Like there is something about like wanting somebody, right? In that way that it makes you feel naked in itself, right? It's like
Mhm.
it's pleasure. It's why we could have one night stands. You think of fifth
Mhm.
house. I mean, and then not want any, we keep on talking about like not wanting or needing anything out of it,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's the trick of the fifth house is can you can you have sex? I mean, I'll say to you, I think women and men are very different in this, right? There's this whole ploy that women can have sex and not want something from it.
Mhm.
I disagree with that, but I think men can. I do think men can. And if you think about it, isn't the sun a masculine?
Yes, yes. But I do think that, as far as one night stands go, there is still, I think it's just that fifth house energy of exchanging creative exchange of physicality and energy. And I also think that both partners come away from that with like with a reset of the life force energy. like you're
If they don't make it mean so, so go back to
exactly.
wait, go
This is
back to say if we have this sexual experience and then I let it go and I don't want something from it. But now say if I want something from it and then that person doesn't reciprocate it back to me, I can lose my life force because then all of a sudden it's dependent if I'm appreciated.
exactly. So there are definitely other conditions, but in
It is interesting, isn't it? Because it all goes
yeah,
back to the same thing. It's like, why am I doing something? If I'm just
right.
doing it to, if I don't do what, that's an interesting thought. Can I do it without wanting anything in return? Can I write the poem and put it out in the world and not need anyone to love the poem, but to love it myself?
Yes, and to love that you put it out in the world. I just love the fact that I I posted this online. I don't know if anyone will see it, but I feel good and healthy and strong and positive about doing it.
Yeah, it really is. It is interesting. And it's also, it's like, where else do you get pleasure? So, for instance, you get pleasure with eating and food. So foods in that, right? Dancing, you get pleasure. And I think it's interesting you use tap dancing because where do you get pleasure? Um, my my friend is a person that does DBT. It's a DBT, it's a therapy. And they came to the school wellness day one day, and it's the best teacher thing I've ever heard. And this is it. How do you feel before you do something? And then how do you feel after it? So you would write, so say if we're going to have sex. Okay, how do I feel before I have sex? And then I'd write 0 to 10. This was not what they talked about in the middle school, by the way. And then after I leave, how do I feel 0 to 10? And then that I could decide if I actually liked something, right? So for instance, if I was going to go shoot archery, how did I feel before I went shoot archery? How do I feel afterwards? And then you would actually know if you found pleasure in whatever activity you were doing. I thought this is the most brilliant thing I've ever heard because we could understand what brings us joy and what doesn't bring us joy.
Right.
Sometimes
Yeah, that's a great
we don't know what brings us joy.
right. Or we're not conscious of it. So that's a nice little check-in to do for yourself, right? Is it how do I feel afterwards? Do I feel like my
My sun's shining brighter.
mm-hmm,
Well, think about ice cream. You ever get like really sad and you just eat? Have you ever done that?
mm-hmm.
Okay. And so do you actually feel better after, or do you feel like a lump?
Yeah. It's not rejuvenating. It's like a band-aid, you know. It's and that's cool, you know, but I do, much better than eating ice cream is to have, for me, a talk with somebody so that I can release whatever it is. And, that person can draw it out of me, and then I can release it and get some kind of equilibrium back.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So I'll say to you, so that I love that. Well, I would wonder what's in your fifth house or like what's going into your fifth house.
I have Neptune natally in my fifth house,
Oh, interesting.
Scorpio.
Well, I'll say to you, is it entering through Scorpio?
Actually, no, it's Libra's on the cusp.
Yeah, okay. So think about just how brilliant that is. So you just said how I feel good about myself is when another person can bring it out in me. And then think about Scorpio energy, right? In Neptune. I need to have these deeper conversations. So you just explained how somebody can feel brighter by looking at their chart. I love it, Bill. I love it because in a way, to feel brighter, you need another person with you because it's Libra energy. I
And
love
again,
that.
I wasn't conscious of it. And that's again goes back to, is it doesn't astrology just provide an enriching layer to everything? You just explained so well what my motivations and impulses are, and where I would find, healing or satisfaction in that very particular Scorpio way.
Yeah. Well, and Libra way, right? Because you needed
And
another
Libra.
person, right? So you needed both. You really
Mhm.
did need both. And it is interesting, right? That after Libra, which is a very sweet, loving, it goes into Scorpio, which is a much deeper kind of intimate, penetrating, a need to be truthful and honest. I think so. Well, go back to why I think astrology is so helpful is if we understand ourselves better, fifth house, right? We could shine our light. So if we could really get who am I? Like what makes me tick? Why am I the way I am? Then I think we could be much more vulnerable.
Yes, yes, because we would have that stronger ego. Again, not 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 being overbearing or selfish. That's not what I'm talking about. A strong ego that can, you know, handle any kind of reply to whatever it is I say or do. Because
Yeah,
that, like, the
it's interesting because
ego
I
would
think of
say,
ego is a bad word, but how about if we change? Because I actually think of ego as I see what you're saying, and you are saying the truth. We have to know our ego. We have to know ourselves. So you're saying you better know yourself. So maybe like, right? But you better know yourself.
and love yourself so much that you're not going to be hurt or thrown off your saddle by things that happen that you might not be expecting.
It makes my heart go because it's so hard not to be loved back. Does that make sense? Like it's so hard
Yeah.
to love ourselves enough that if everyone's throwing tomatoes at you, can you stand there and know that maybe you just have to switch audiences, that those people that aren't appreciating you, that's okay. That's on them. But how do I make it not so much about me? Oh, we lost him. Wait, we lost you for a minute, right? When we said, how do I make it so much not about me?
Yes.
It's so hard.
It's so hard. It's so hard. But I think that's where, heart centered energy can really help here. Because a strong heart means you're just looking at everything more compassionately. That means yourself and others.
I always think like, how about if we were as kind to ourselves as we are to others, right?
Yes. And I think we're created to have an experience in life that is as joyous as possible. That's what I think.
Well, you go back to like how do you have a happy life? And how do you have a happy life is having no expectations. Like the only reason why we're not happy is because we have expectations. And so it is interesting to think about how do I live? Like the sun doesn't try to be the sun. And then if you think about the sun, right? Now the clouds are going to go over the sun. Save the picture. It's not making it wrong. It's just going over the clouds and then it will pass. This too shall pass. And so even if we're heartbroken right now, right? This too shall pass. And I remember I have one daughter who was so brokenhearted. She's like, I will never love again. And I was like, oh, I hope that that's not true because to love is the most beautiful thing. It's such an offering. It's such an offering of the self. To create is such an offering of the self to let someone share your artwork. And you're the artwork.
Yes, you are the artwork. You are the creation. I love that metaphor of the sun and the clouds. I love it.
Yes, the sun. Well, yeah, and the sun doesn't try to rise. It just rises. Every day it rises. And I always think I will go, do you watch the sunrise? But you're on the West Coast.
Yes, I do. I do watch the sunrise.
And so I always think that's really an interesting thing. No matter what, there's the sun there. Even if you can't see it, it's there. But also what's interesting about, which I think that people mistake with astrology, and I'm one of those people. I don't think you are your sun. I think you're getting to your sun. So I think it's like you're trying to get there. It's like a journey. It's not like you're just born and you're, so if you have an Aries sun, you're just brave. Or if you're a Leo sun, you're just the queen. It's you have to learn to be the queen if you have a Leo sun. You have to learn to get comfortable in yourself enough that you can shine, right? It's not natural. It's like a
I don't think I've ever heard that before, but I think you are brilliantly on the money there. I really that is just going to change everything in my head about my approach to the sun in astrology. Because I think you're right. I was just going to say, again about the sun is shining constantly, even as our earth turns and we don't see it at night. It's still pushing out. So why can't we be more like the sun, still pushing out that light? Even if the world turns away from us, still radiate. I'm joyful. I'm loving. This is who I am. Okay, the world has turned. It's not facing me now, but it will turn back again. In the meantime, I am just pulsing. I'm still pulsing with that joyous, radiant sun energy.
yeah, and what you're saying is so interesting because it's the sun knows it's there, right? It's not because it's raining, it's not thinking it's gone. So I think that's so interesting what you're saying, right? It's like, or if it's nighttime, the sun's someplace, right? It's the sun has risen someplace else. The sun doesn't go away. It's just that we're not seeing the sun. So I think that's so interesting. And so if you actually were that sun and that person and you pulsated, it's an interesting thought because, okay, here I have a question for you. I am not good at like weather stuff, right? But if it rains here, their sun is out somewhere else, right? You just might not see the sun. What you said is so brilliant because think about the rain, right? It's raining right here, all of my thing. If the sun decided it's not going to shine anymore because it's raining someplace or somebody doesn't like it, the rain, I'm just thinking of like someone dumping water on you. The sun doesn't stop shining. So how do you practice that? So I'll say everything's a practice. And so I'll say to you based on that, and if you were to think about the fifth house, how do you keep creating? Even if everybody doesn't like what you're creating, maybe they're just not ready for you.
And that's why I think you can tell yourself, hmm, why don't I just be like the sun? Just the sun is the sun's going to be there when the rain disappears and the clouds move away. The sun's still going to be there.
And why is the rainbow? Because we get lots of rainstorms, and I love rainstorms because there's something that clears it out, and then
Yes.
beautiful rainbow afterwards. And if you see, there is just always a rainbow. You could always find the rainbow if you look. And I'll
Mhm.
say to you, through the rain and through the clouds, there's always something so beautiful that can be created out of the sadness, I'll say.
Yes. And that's also something to carry with you. After every storm, the rainbows appear and the birds sing again, and the sun is shining.
When you think about most artists are creating out of pain,
Yes.
right? Like just can't take it anymore. You have to sit down and create because you're going to go in your mind, right? I don't know. There's something to that in itself, right? Some of the greatest works of art is misery.
Right. again, I think it's that self-expression of the fifth house that commands people to push it out. I have to do this thing. I have to.
Yeah, I have to kiss that girl, right? Like there's this like you don't even it doesn't even make sense. Or
Yes,
I have to kiss this boy and it
right,
doesn't make any sense. You can't be thinking because if you think about what's going to happen next, you might not kiss the person.
right. Exactly. And you can say that to yourself, like, why do I find that person so attractive? And then you say, no, 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 not, he's that person's not in the category that I had for myself. So why is it that I'm, thinking about, wow, that's a sexy overbite, but blah, 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 blah. And then you say, oh, they live too far away. And so, but then you're still thinking about that, that sexy thing. It could be a personality thing. I don't know. And
Well, there's
that's
something that's intuition. There is something with fire energy, right? With fire energy, there is an intuition, right? So if you're feeling that and there's a drive to it, sometimes it's because you just want to have fun.
yes, yes,
But you have to see if it is fun. I will say to you, because some things we could think are fun and they're really not fun,
right.
right? I go back to the eating, right?
Mhm,
If if every time if I think this is helping me and then I'm eating all this food, right? I have to ask myself, is it actually really helping me? So I
mhm,
do think that that's a very important part of the fifth
mhm,
house. But I do think if there's something about when you're a child, you don't think about if this person fits into my box, if I'm going to be friends with them. You're just
mhm.
friends with them, right?
Right,
It's amazing. When
right.
you're a kid, you will play with anybody
Mhm,
as long as they want to play what you're playing with. And if they don't, then you go off and you don't make it mean something. I think that's a very interesting thing too about groups. Can
mhm,
we be our individual selves
mhm,
in the group, or are you having to conform so much that you lose your own self of identity?
mhm. Right. And there's also that, energy of just going for it, I think, in the fifth house. Like gambling. Gambling
Oh,
is fifth house activity. So gambling in the sense that just put your foot on the gas and go. Come hell or high water.
wait, gambling
And
is
that's
very much a fifth
exhilarating.
house.
That's exhilarating feeling.
Wait, and I'm going to go back to this. This is so funny. So I learned all these people give me such great messages. They're so smart, humans. Okay, so one day I was watching this girl gamble and she was winning. And I was like, oh my God, how do you win? And she said, you want to hear what she said? It was the most brilliant thing I ever heard. She's like, I don't care if I lose. And I thought, oh my God, I can't gamble because I
Yeah.
don't want to lose. And you
Right.
think about even playing games,
Yeah.
right? Like if you really want to play
Yes.
a game, you have to play the game. You might lose, you might win. But gambling, she said, I win because I don't care if I lose. And I thought, oh, like,
That's probably why I don't like poker. You just explained to me why I don't like it. Because I don't enjoy it because I just focus on the losing rather than, you know, the just the fun of it.
yeah, well, it's so funny. Wait, I think David's the same. Wait, I'm gonna tell you, I think you guys, it's so funny. He never wants to play the games. He doesn't like losing, by the way. And we're like, why don't you want to play? It's just fun to play. And
Mhm.
but is it really fun to play if you don't like to lose?
Mhm. Right, right.
Not so much. If it goes back to the whole sex. If you're willing to have sex and then not hold on to them, it could
Mhm.
be really fun. But you have to really know who you are.
Yes, yes. And I think you have to have, again, another fifth house quality. You have to have a childlike approach to these things. Just can, have wonder about things and a sense of adventure about things before your mind kind of closes it all down.
I like that. I love the word wonder. I think it's such a pretty word. I look up the word wonder. I think it's such a brilliant that I we should look it up. But wonder is such a beautiful definition. Like what is the definition for wonder? Do you know?
Let's see.
Yeah, look up the word. It's such a beautiful word.
So, a feeling of surprise mingled with admiration caused by something beautiful, unexpected, unfamiliar, or inexplicable. So that if your heart's open, then you can accept the unfamiliar, the unexpected, the inexplicable. Like you don't, your mind doesn't have to categorize it or understand it or put some kind of monetary value on it. You're just open to the experience.
Yeah. And anything can happen. I mean, because you're totally just being. I go back to the word I'm a being. And what is the sun? It's just being. And so
Mm-hmm.
if I'm here, I'm just being, and I'm not trying. The word perform is also a fifth house word, but are we all performing in a way? But are we just perform? Who are we? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Who are we?
Mm-hmm. There's another word associated with the fifth house that I picked up in my reading, and that is the word purity. Again, I think that has to do with childhood and your approach to life. And if
Okay, so look up the
somebody,
definition of purity because I think it's so funny. I love to look up definitions because you could use the word wonder, but then when you gave us the definition of wonder, it's
Mhm,
like everything we just talked about, right? So it's like there's something
mhm,
nice just about understanding the definition of wonder and seeing how everything we just talked about is about wonder and how
mhm.
it just really correlates to it.
Yeah, I'm getting a very brief. It's so I'm going to look up pure because I'm not really getting it. So pure is, free from dust, dirt. Um,
Oh no, okay, just read it. There's something really interesting because I'll say to you, go read it anyway, even if you don't think
okay. So pure is unmixed with any other matter.
yeah, that's perfect. There's
Yeah,
no other story, right? There's just this
right,
presence. It's
right.
perfect, actually.
Hmm.
You know, okay, so what's his name? Joseph Campbell. He said, follow your bliss, which is, if you think about it, a very fifth house word, bliss, right? And
Yes.
if you want to be happy, you have to follow your bliss. And I'll say to you, there's something so pure in that. There's something so simple. There's all the other things don't matter. I mean, that word purity is actually I would have never thought it was a fifth house word. I would have thought it was a sixth house word. It is such a fifth house word. So thank you. It's really so interesting, right?
Yeah, I think that has everything to do with the archetype of the misunderstood artist, right? Who people discover after they're long gone or whatever the reason. They're they're still they're still trying to deal with the difficulties of life, but that does not prevent them from focusing on the things that they need to express and they need to create. They're just, and that's purity. That's not letting the world crowd in to their mind and their hearts and their being. They have their calling and they're unstoppable that way.
It's so funny. I just watched the movie Mrs. Potter, Miss Potter. It's about Beatrice Potter who did you know who I'm talking
Peter
about? Peter
Rabbit.
Rabbit. Yeah, Peter Rabbit. And it was about her life. It's on Prime, by the way. Very good. But it was so interesting because what you said, she had all these stuff going on in her life, but she created anyway. And she would create this magical fairy tale. And I mean, it's an amazing story, especially it's like about a woman who ends up, and she kind of does follow her bliss. It's really interesting to see. But when you were talking, I thought, oh my God, it's like she was an artist and she always was an artist. And it didn't matter what anyone thought about her. She was an artist. And it didn't matter what was going on in her life. She was an artist. And I think we're all artists in our own way. And I think personally, I think we are creating our lives by what we do in a day, right? So how our day is and how we're responding to it is the creation of our life. So,
And don't you find it interesting? Again, this is where the sun comes in, I think, that the sun rises each morning and brings us a new day, a beautiful new refresh. And that should bring a lump in your throat when you think about it. That you wake up, the sun is rising, and you have an entire day before you to, you know,
do
to,
what makes you happy. Because
yes,
at the end of the day, if you're going to have one day left to live, I go back to Michael Singer. He says, if you have 4 days left to live, what matters? Go back to purity, right? Like, what's besides the matter, right? But isn't that what you said? Like, the other stuff that doesn't really matter. All you have is this one day. There's no guarantees.
mm-hmm,
But if you're not doing things that make you happy, how do you
mm-hmm,
shine?
mm-hmm.
And how do you get to understand how you shine? I mean, go back to that sun idea of, are we not our sons? And we're trying to get to our sons. And how do you get to your son? You better make sure you're spending your day. Your soul knows when you're not doing something that's right. Does that make sense? Your
Yeah,
soul knows when you're not supposed to go along with everybody else. And are you listening?
absolutely, 100%.
So it is really hard to be human because I'll say to you, it would be really great in concept to be able to get this, right? I keep on thinking, how would it be if I really didn't care what people thought of me? If I could like myself enough that no matter what you threw at me, it would be okay because I would know who I am and I wouldn't need to prove to you that I'm something else. Like if you don't like the way I shine, okay, so you don't like the way I shine. What am I supposed to do? Stop shining it the way I am and be something like you want me to be? And I think this is the hardest thing about being human because everyone wants us to behave like they want you to behave.
Right, right. And then we put restrictions on ourselves for that reason. We don't want to be thrown out. We don't want to be voted off the island. So we do things that we don't really feel comfortable with, or there's something, there's something that that you find that's like an irritant, but you keep it to yourself because you don't want to be voted off the island.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Did you watch Survivor? Because we watched this a
I
little bit.
don't, I don't, but I
Okay.
know enough
Well,
about it.
but it's interesting about that even because in some ways you have to hide how great you are in that show. And so interesting, you said you don't want to be voted off the island. Brilliant. I'll say to you because a lot of it is if you're too good, if you're actually too good, they throw you off the island if you're too liked because then all of a sudden you're a threat to them. And so I'll say to you, oh my God, are we just going through life just dimming our lights so we're not thrown off the goddamn island? Oh my God, Phil. Yes.
But there's those crazy geniuses who just will not let that. Uh, they're still going to show their light because they can't help it. They have that purity, that childlike goal of putting it out there
Well, maybe it's
because
too
it's
important to them, right? Like
right.
if you have something to really say, right? Maybe it's just too important what the group thinks, and you just know that you can't live without saying it.
Yes.
I mean, it's gonna be really interesting because how, what a beautiful thing it will be if we could allow everyone to be their light and not try to dim each other. That's what I'll say. That would be a beautiful gift. And if something just another thing about fifth house is really interesting is children. And if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, we could easily put it onto our children and like live vicariously through our children, which is an interesting thought. And so why so many people's are not separated from their mother, daughter, father, son, right? Like if the father didn't become the athlete he wanted, does he put all that pressure on the son and the son feels it? It's also a very big part of the fifth house. But it all goes back to you and your responsibility of your own individual self.
And it's your responsibility to be happy. I do think that's your responsibility. And there are, you know, it is within your power to be happy despite what slings and arrows may come your way.
Yeah, inner happiness. Well, I'll go back to yours, right? So that Neptune is so perfect because I'll say to you how important your spirituality. If you have Neptune in the right, it would be such an important part of your own spirituality to love yourself and to look in the darkness, Phil. I'll say to you, anyone that has Neptune in Scorpio, right? It's our job to like look in our own darkness and be willing to face that stuff in a very spiritual way. So whoever's listening that has beautiful Neptune, that's a kind of a really cool Neptune, if you ask me. I like it,
Yeah,
right?
there's
There's something very profound about it because spirituality, going deep, knowing that you're whole, right? It's just that's Neptune, knowing you're whole and being willing to face all the things in the most creative ways. It's
and
really
there's
beautiful.
that it's that big emotional element to it as well, water, spirituality, compassion, emotions, beliefs, feelings.
It's funny because I have Pluto there, which is about transformation, but it's also seeing your own fears. And so for me, I could see how much fear I have about being too much, right? Being too much for another person, right? Because I'm a lot. And I get that. Like it just you're too much. And how do I not care if someone thinks I'm too much? And I don't know. I guess if I'm for some people and I'm not for other people, and I can't control that. And Pluto, you have to really look also, it's a very in-depth, willing to look into the darkness and look at your fears and your worries and what almost what's under the bed, like of why I behave this way. So it's really interesting to be human.
It sure is.
It's a journey, and every day that we go on it and we are willing to pack our bag and I'll say use our creativity and be our own hero. I mean, I think, right? I think fifth house too is you go back to Aries. So say if Aries is the hero, but then the Aries has to go on the journey. So the next fire sign is Leo. So the Aries has to become the person that's willing to be seen. And then I would go back to Sagittarius, right? And then I would have to have faith in who I am. I mean, that's like the hero's journey to the fullest, but
Mhm.
you're the hero of your story. Nobody else is. So stop asking anyone to save you. I think that's a very fifth house, or the group to save you. The group's not
Yeah.
going to save us.
Well, right. You have what you need already. It's in you. And this whole journey, I think, is about revealing that.
And being vulnerable.
Mhm.
Where could we be vulnerable? And where could we be vulnerable with each other? Because there's nothing more beautiful than opening your heart to somebody.
Right.
And and to not be scared of it.
Mhm.
Because I'll say the only person that's missing out if they're not receiving your heart is them.
Yeah. Yes.
So, well, I appreciate you because, I'll say to you, I feel, and I know I'm right, that you and I have opened our hearts to each other and we are willing to be not really naked in front of each other, but our relationship, I'll say, besides not on this call, but we are allowing each other to see each other in a vulnerable way that
Mhm.
maybe we wouldn't, that we're almost surprised by. It could surprise us a little bit, but there's something so freeing about that.
It certainly is. There's there's but I think you have to get to the other side of it, right? You have to project out a little bit, and it's like testing the waters, and then you project even further, and it's like I watch these videos on YouTube about dogs that are rehabilitated, and I watch them go through their first day, and then they show a clip of a week later, and then a month later, and then at the end you've got this playful, happy, loving creature that is completely different from the shivering, walled off, shaky animal that you first seen. And that's, you know, that is that creature's life journey. And we're all on that, somewhere on that path, where we hope to get to where the sun is compelling us to go. And the sun, being heart centered, has everything to do with, I think, strengthening our hearts so that we can be more loving and compassionate, independent, whatever outcome.
Amen. It's a gamble.
It's a
Independent
gamble,
of any outcome, and it's a gamble.
a
So,
big one, a
so
really
let's
big
keep
one.
gambling. I'll say to you, I'm in. I'm in. Are you gonna gamble with me? I'll say that.
Yeah.
Let's keep gambling.
Yes, do it. Let's do it.
Well, I hope everyone else gambles too. And I'll say whether you watched us or you didn't watch us, I'm very proud of us.
Yes.
And if you did watch us and you like us, subscribe and give a thumbs up. But it is interesting, right? Because I'll say we're perfect examples of people creating and not knowing what's going to happen, but we're doing it for the love of astrology or love of who we can be.
And our reason is pure.
It really truly is. It really is. And we don't make it. Another nice, beautiful thing is we're not making it mean anything if no one's watching.
Again, so completely pure in our approach.
Well, may we stay pure always, and may we always know our worth and our value. And I loved that last line. So thank you. Thank you. Giving you a big hug. I love you.
Thank you, Courtney.